Hello, this is Andrine, a Jewish American priestess, and it is Erev Rosh Hashanah, the day before the new year of 5784. And I thought I would try to sneak in one last reading for this year with the intention to bring some hope and renewal into the new year. And to that end, I have the keys, the keys that I got at a market in Siena, Italy this summer when I was repairing my desk over there. And they're very ancient keys. And when I saw them sitting on my desk today, my altar today, I thought, what are we doing here? We're opening up the gates. And there's been a lot of gate imagery these days, these last few days, like literally in my life. We went to open our gate, and we had a beautiful metal gate commissioned a few years ago with grapes on it, and we have grape leaves growing over it now, and we went to open it, and it sheared off its hinges. The gate itself just fell. And here we are coming into this time of year when we talk about the gates opening so that we have the ability to have our prayers heard and answered by heaven. And I don't know how much anyone believes in literal gates that are opening, or whether it's metaphorical gates that are opening, that we might offer up what we have to offer to the universe and have the universe hear our requests and our pleas and maybe answer. And they say that this is a time of year when the veil is thin, where we're going into this time of year where the space between the worlds, that liminal space, is a little thinner so that we can transition from one realm into the other. As we transition from this year into the next year, as we do our teshuvah, which is to say our return back to the self, back to the oneness of the divine. So here we are at this time of year. I have the keys. What do these keys open? Probably nothing physical or literal in the world, but we can use them symbolically to open ourselves up so that we are able to better receive what is being offered to us as a gift, that we are better able to walk out into the world more freely, not to have to worry about locks and knobs and swinging gates. I've been thinking a little bit, there's a phrase that comes around at this time of year in Elul that is used to symbolize that the divine is very close to us. And that phrase is, the king is in the field. And that's used for the entire month of Elul. As we're playing the shofar, we're trumpeting the arrival of the king. But I'm an American, and I have a little issue with kings and sovereignty, and maybe even just authority in general. And as far as fields are concerned, I think about it in terms of agriculture, which I don't do. I do gardening. I have my herbs that I've grown, and I have the plants that I tend and the fruits that I harvest, but I don't have a field where I go and plant crops. So it's hard for me to relate to the king and the field in that way. But when I think about it in terms of sovereignty, like Malchut, the physical manifestation of the Shekhinah in the world, sovereignty. And my own personal sovereignty, the indwelling presence of the Shekhinah, which is the divine within me, that sovereignty, that I can relate to. And when I was thinking about it this last week, the idea of that sovereignty being in the field, like the field of the matrix, the field that we exist in, that energetic field. The sovereign is in the field. The sovereign is the field that we have this it's like a material object, but it's intangible, the field. The field of energy, the field of radio waves, the field of the sun rays shining on us and us absorbing that energy into our lives, into our bodies, to our physical bodies. That I can get behind. The sovereign is in the field. Not only is the sovereign in the field, but the sovereign is the field. And we are part of that sovereign, that we have divinity within us. So we are also the field. And if we can accept and acknowledge that, that veil becomes very thin. And we can transition between this place and that. Because there is no place when you get to that concept that the field is all the things, that substrate, the Ein Sof, that without end. So that's where I am this morning, very early, on the last day of Elul, the day before, the night before Rosh Hashanah, as the year turns over. And again, that's just a turning of a page, a turning of a calendar, the going to sleep and the waking up, the sun setting and the sun rising. Nothing is changing literally any different than any other day. But we can make it so. We can make it sacred. We can make every transition like this sacred. So that's where I am this morning. And I'm going to do a reading. I don't have it figured out yet. I think I'm going to take Hebrunes. I'm going to do a full spread, maybe. And we'll just start with there and see what else comes up this morning. So I'm going to bring this camera down a little closer so we can see a little more clearly what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to start with just my bowl of myrtle wood runes, Hebrunes, and I'm going to shuffle them up. I'm going to move these keys off to the side, and I'm going to scatter in the copper laver, this washing bowl, this washing basin of copper, which reminds us of the laver that sat outside the temple, in which we would cleanse ourselves, in which we would wash our hands and our face and our feet before we entered into the place of the holiness. We're going to put these Hebrunes in this laver and see what comes up. Okay, so when I do a full spread, which is to say all of the runes at once, I take out every one that is face down to begin with. All right, I've got a couple that are stacked here, but I'm going to leave them as they are for now, and we'll get closer as we read them. I'm going to take a breath, make a cleansing sound here. All right, let's take a look and see what we've got going on here. First, I'm just really drawn to the fact that we have two stacked together here. And the one on the top is the letter Chet. And the letter Chet is the letter, you can see it looks a little bit like a chuppah, which is a marriage canopy. Is the first letter of the word Chai, which means life. And it is the first letter of the word chuppah, which means marriage canopy. So I think about it in terms of being about contracts and commitments. It's the number 8 in Gematria. It's the 8th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And it is, to that end, about the infinite, because the number 8 has that infinity loop within it. 8 is the one that comes after 7. 7 is the number of days of creation. So we have 7 days of creation and then eternity. So I'm seeing this as a center of our reading, even though it's slightly off a center, because of the stack here, because it's on top of another letter. And the letter chet being about life and also choshek, darkness. The first arrival of the word, the letter chet in the Torah is in the word choshek, which means darkness, when the divine separated darkness from light. The first day. So this is what's standing up. This is what's coming closest to us, this idea of life, choosing life, being written in the book of life, which is one of the things we talk about at Rosh Hashanah. May you be written in the book of life for a good life, for a life of goodness and glory. We say this each month, but Rosh Hashanah in particular. May you have done well and be pleasing unto the divine, that indwelling presence, so that you merit another year of life. Which isn't to say that people who die don't merit, but that wheels turn and seasons change. So we have to embrace both the darkness and the light. We have to embrace both the life and the death. And that's what I see in the letter chet here. And the letter that it was hiding here, I'm going to just set it off to the side slightly and go this way, is the letter beit. And beit is the first letter of Torah. It's the second letter of the alphabet, but it's the first letter of Torah, Bereshit, in the beginning. So it's this beautiful message here that we have life and the beginning, and the letter that means in and with, and it also means home. It is this letter that symbolizes the home, our house, maybe even our place of worship. And I've often said this, but I see beit as also being our body, because it is where we dwell all the time. Regardless of where we are, which building we're in, which physical location we're in, we're always in our body until we aren't. Beit is the binary transformation of life and death in the Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, which describes each of the letters and talks about how they were used to create the universe. That these are the building blocks, the channels that were carved into the substrate that allowed divinity to flow into the world. So beginnings and our home, maybe our planet, which is also the home where we live regardless of where our body is. We're so far, nearly every body that was ever born is on this planet, although I believe some have been launched into space. We have both the idea of life and death in the letter beit, beginnings here. The second becoming first. That's a theme that's come up in some of the episodes of Judaism Unbound that I've been listening to. It's a podcast and institute of unlearning. That this theme for this new year has been the second coming first, because we're in the second year of the Shemitah cycle, which I won't go into right now, but this idea of the second year, the second time around, the second thing that time we get to try something, we do it a little better. So having the opportunity for a second chance is also wrapped up in the letter beit. And it's hidden underneath the infinite. It's hidden underneath the letter Chet, which represents life, and this is the binary transformation of life and death. So we have both of those concepts here. Darkness and life, life and death, contracts, commitments, the infinite, and home. All wrapped up, bound up together here. As we go a little bit to the left and a little lower, we have the letter Tzadi. And here's what it looks like. It is the letter that begins the word Tzadik and Tzedek, which means justice and righteousness. And it's this beautiful letter that looks a little bit like the branches of a tree growing up out of a ground here. It's the letter that corresponds to the tribe of Asher. Asher, which seems like to me like a shortened version of Asherah, which is the feminine divine that dwells within the trees. And so to me, having Tzadi here next to our kind of central issue is that we've got some justice to perform. We have some, there's also the word tzedakah, which means mutual aid. It's that giving back. So perhaps as we move into Rosh Hashanah, we have some tzedakah to give. We have to do some sort of justice and repair. Maybe potentially to the earth, to give gratitude to the trees, give them their due, their justice, as they provide the atmosphere that we breathe, the air that we breathe that allows us to stay alive on this planet. And Asher means happy, the one who is happy. So we have this wrapping up of Asher, the happiness that comes with justice, and the Asherah, the indwelling divine within the trees, and how they're bound up together. And since this is a little lower on our reading, it sounds like there's some work that needs to be done. Justice needs to be pursued. A little further to the left and a little lower, we have the letter Gimel, and it's fallen down on its face. It generally looks like this, but it's showing up like this. Gimel is the letter that means a foot or a camel walking forward, and it is related to the planet Jupiter, which is called Tzedek in Hebrew, so about justice as well. And since it's fallen over, Gimel is said to be a person running toward justice, running toward giving of themselves to tzedakah. And they've fallen down doing that run. Something is not showing up as the ability to run forward. Something has fallen down. And perhaps there's a need to find our footing, a need to take a moment and decide what is it we are walking toward, and how have we fallen down along the way? Have we been able to pursue justice in the way that we are called to do? And since this is low and face down on the reading, I'm guessing that's maybe not the case. It's time to do some turning of that Gimel back upwards. We have the letter Dalet also down here. Dalet is also face down. You can see it's turned like this. It usually is like this. Dalet is the doorway. It's the letter that comes after Gimel. So you have the Gimel walking forward, and you have the Dalet, the doorway through which one walks in that liminal space, the space between the worlds, the space between the months right now, where we're sitting in this Erev time, this liminal space between the worlds. And since it's low and face down, it makes me wonder whether we're able to walk through upright right now, that maybe there's some challenge going through that transition. We don't always get to choose when and how we transition, but transition is inevitable. So contemplate that. Consider how we're having challenges going through. We've got a few more letters down low. We have the letter Tet, And it looks like this, but it's fallen over as well. It's the letter that means a vessel. Sometimes it's seen as a womb. Sometimes it's seen as that shofar, the ram's horn that we sound during the month of Elul to wake ourselves up. And it's sometimes seen as a snake even. So there's this idea of renewal within it. Renewal in that something new is being gestated in this womb space, that some transition is happening, that some turning is happening. And it is the first letter of the word Tov, which means good. And so it's important to see the goodness within whatever this vessel is, whatever this cup is. And since it is tipped, it makes me wonder whether we're not seeing the good in the things, that maybe there's been some challenges. Maybe this Gimel and this Dalet turning face down is making the good run out, that we're having some trouble seeing the good even in the difficult times. Because as I was saying, in that field where divinity is and exists, there is no judgment about good and bad. There's a poem by Rumi that says, out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I will meet you there. And that's what this reminds me of, that we have this concept of what is good, and that's been tipped over. And what may be important right now is to see the goodness in all things, even if they're challenging, even if they seem dark. And that's being a stumbling block for us right now, that inability to see the good. Down lower than that, even, we have the letter Shin, and Shin is almost all the way tipped over. Shin is about fire. It's the mother letter of fire, fire being that idea of spirit, the transitional, that plasma, constantly moving, difficult to pin down, flickering flame. You can see here around the bowl, we have many, many fires. And they are powerful and transformative. And they can also be destructive. But the way I'm seeing Shin in this reading down at the bottom and turned over is that Shin also represents the summer in the year. And here we are in the Northern Hemisphere coming to the end of summer. Our summer is coming to an end. Shin represents the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky. But it's also the first letter of Shalom, which means wholeness, not just peace, but wholeness. Wholeness, which by definition must include brokenness. It's the first letter of the word Shekhinah, the indwelling presence. And it's very, very low on our reading and flipped over on its head. So the summer is coming to an end. Maybe that fire of the summer is dwindling. Maybe there's been some brokenness that we're having difficulty seeing the good in right now. And we're going to get to these other letters that are higher in the reading, but I've really been drawn to the low ones to start. The lowest letter in the reading here today is the letter Aleph, and it is also upside down. Generally, it looks like this, and it's been flipped over. It's funny because Aleph looks the same, basically upside down and upside right, but you can tell in this style that it's upside down. The Aleph is the first letter. It's the number 1. It means oneness. It balances above and below the heavens and the earth, the divine and the human. It's got the letter Vav going right through the center of it, Vav, which means and. So it's the heavens and the earth, the divine and the human, the spirit and the body. All things balanced here. It's the mother letter of air. So it represents breath, the divine breath in us, the atmosphere, the ability to breathe. It's the first letter of most of the divine names in Torah. And so it brings us back to that oneness, that idea of coming back to the one, to returning to the one, It's very low on our reading. It's interesting that we have both fire and air at the bottom here. They're not separate. They are interconnected, as is everything. But we have this oneness down at the bottom and on its head. And it's so tempting to see that as a negative thing. But as I'm looking through this and the Tov, the tet here, which I'm seeing as representing our inability to see goodness even in what's considered dark or low, I want to flip it. I want to elevate it back up, or like flip the whole bowl, because the sovereignty is in the field. So there is no up and down, there is no right and wrong, there is no good and bad. So Aleph at the bottom upside down is also Aleph at the top upside right. It's all one. It's all one. As I move up further here, let's go all the way to the top. We have the letter He. And the letter He is the first letter of the word Hineni. Here I am. I am here right now. Regardless of where I am and when I am, here I am. Hineni is the answer to the call when one hears their name called by the divine, in whatever way that sounds. And it may be an auditory thing, it may be a visual thing, it may be just a sense in your body. When you hear something calling you forward and you know it's divine energy, the correct answer is Hineni. Here I am, ready for service, without even knowing what it is. It's an interesting concept to be able to say, here I am ready, without knowing what the task is yet. But it's right at the top of the reading. So that's what we're being asked to do right now as we step into this new year, having no idea what's going to happen, whether there'll be health or illness, life or death. I am here. I am ready. And maybe it's a preparatory letter saying, take some time today as we transition to this space of liminality between this year, next year, this breath and next breath, and say, here I am. Become ready for whatever's coming next. It's the most important thing right now. In between the He and the Het and the Beit, we have the letter Vav. And Vav is the letter that literally means and. It is about connections. It looks like a nail, a peg, a hook. It's the thing that connects one thing to another, a fastener. It stands tall with its head toward heaven and plants itself in the ground like a root. And you can see that if you look at the very top, you have the letter Yud, which is the first letter of the divine name of beingness, the Yud He Vav He. So it's connecting to divinity while staying firmly rooted where one is. Yes, and. Here I am, and ready. Vav is the number 6 in Gematria, so it speaks to that 6th day of creation, which is the last day of active creation before we come to the day of Shabbat. And that's today. It's Friday, where I am, and it is the last day before Shabbat. It's the last day of the year. Our new year begins on Shabbat this year. So it's up here connecting us to our presence and to the idea of life and darkness, connecting us to the planet, connecting us to the divine. So remember connections. Remember our connections with divinity. Remember our connections with each other. It's so easy sometimes to get lost in the esoteric and spiritual above me and the divine, me and the spiritual, and forget that other people matter, that it's important that there's divinity in each of us. So even those interpersonal relationships, which can be contentious, this too is Shekhinah, this too is presence, this too is divinity. So remember those connecting pieces between ourselves and the divine, ourselves and each other. Up here at the top I have the letter Nun. Nun, which is tipped over, it generally looks like this. Nun is the letter that begins the word Ne'aman, which means humble or humility, but not humiliation. It's also the first letter of the word Nes, which means miracle. And it's tipped over, which is interesting because it's already bowed, right? It's already bent and kneeling with its head bowed. And this time it's prostrated. It's laying itself down, really prostrating. And sometimes during holiday services, during high holidays, when we're standing before the divine in a community, some of us prostrate, get down, not just on our knees, but on our faces on the ground, and lay ourselves down in humility before the power and glory of divinity. Sometimes that physicality feels really right. And maybe for you, it's about going out into the world. Today is going to be, where I am, it's going to be 80 degrees. It's very late in the year for that kind of temperature, but if it feels right to go out into the world, onto the earth, and just lay yourself down, put yourself in contact, full body contact with the earth, maybe that's a way to connect. Maybe that's a way to remain present. Maybe that's a way to embrace life, to embrace the planet itself underneath here. Maybe it's a way to really turn yourself over to see a new perspective. It's important to stand tall, but it's also important to become connected. Those things are in the same letter. And the Nun is saying to us, take time in solitude, take time to find humility in the face of the divine, in the face of the grandiosity of our creation of the planet Earth, of your own body. Take time to become humble. And just below that, we have the letter Ayin. And Ayin it's an eye. So it's about seeing. It's about seeing our way forward, but it's also about being seen by divinity, being watched over and protected by the divine. And it is also turned on its face. Sometimes the best way we can see is to close our eyes, to go inside. Ayin is the number 70 in Gematria, and 70 is that idea of 7, the number 7 of 7 days of creation, times 10. So this ultimate manifestation of a completion. As we're coming to the end of the year, this seems ripe. This seems ripe for the picking, that we have an ultimate manifestation of completion that means vision, being able to see our way forward. And again, like I said, sometimes the best way to see is to close one's eyes and look within. And since this is face down, high in our reading, below the humility, next to the connection letter, goes number 6, number 70. And I think it's like not only are we near the end of this week, near the end of this year, but we're ultimately completing this cycle, this phase, this summertime is coming to an end, this year is coming to an end, this week is coming to an end. Maybe something else in your life is coming to an end. Whatever it is, take some time to close your eyes so that you can see better, if that makes any sense. Up high in the reading, the highest letter in our reading, we have the letter Yud. And again, it is flipped over. The letter Yud, which is the smallest of all the letters, it's the seed. It's the sperm, that which allows for new growth. And it's the first letter of the name of the divine that we know as Yud He Vav He, the 4-letter tetragrammaton, the unpronounceable name. And that letter combination, which we do not pronounce, it's as if all 3 tenses of past, present, and future, becoming, being, having been, have been smooshed together into one word, one name. So I have been, I am, and I will be, all together in one. And so this letter represents the beginning of that idea of becoming. And how will we become in the new year? How will we show up? What seeds have been planted that will nurture to grow? What seeds are we planting now that will grow in the future? It's like the seed and the one point of the Big Bang. It said when the divine created the universe, they had to contract themselves down into one point so that there would be space. This idea of tzimtzum, making space. And that's what we're doing right now as we transition into the new year. We're making space in ourselves, in our hearts, maybe in our homes, in our bodies. We're making space for what is to come. Showing up, saying Hineni. Embracing the life and the darkness. Allowing for that seed to be planted. And when seeds get planted, they go underground. And we cannot see them for some time. And then they spring forth when the time is ready. We've got the Yud at the top, and it's flipped over. And I love that. I love that we have the Yud flipped at the top and the Aleph flipped at the bottom. They seem similar to me. Of course, the Aleph has 2 Yuds in it. Every letter has a Yud in it somewhere. They're all starting with that one point. But these 2 letters in particular often symbolize, divinity in the form of, big divinity. The Yud He Vav He, the Aleph, the one. Again, the one and the one point. And Yud is the number 10. So we have 1 and 10 times 1, which is that big manifestation of the divine. At the top and the bottom. I think that's beautiful. A beautiful way to come into the new year. And over here to the right we have the letter Samech. Samech, which is about seasons. It's about cycles and wheels turning. It's the first letter of the word Smicha, which means ordination, the transferring of power from one authority to another. It's also the first letter of the word Sovev, which means to surround. So when people are ordained, they are surrounded by those who are empowering them, and hands are laid upon them. And that knowledge or spiritual authority is transferred on in a circle, like as a transition to the next thing. And so Samech is about seasons and cycles and changing. And here we are at the end of the season, at the end of the year, at the end of the month, and at the beginning of a new season, at the beginning of the next week, at the beginning of the new month, at the beginning of the new year. Cycles and seasons are turning. And I love that Samech in the Paleo Hebrew looked like a thorn. And you can see that Yud in the upper left corner, which looks like that leftover thorn here. It is the letter that corresponds to the foundation of agitation in the Sefer Yetzirah. Something has been irritating, thorny. And so we have this prodding forward. Something that is irritating us or agitating us will process us forward. It will encourage us to move forward, and possibly that is divinity, possibly that is that Yud that is pushing us forward into the next thing. So Samech is here to surround us with protection, to agitate us forward, and to remind us that everything changes and ends. And this is just another time of year where things are changing and ending, as always. And this too is divinity. And our last letter in the reading, which is the letter that is no letter, the Ein Sof, the blank, the foundation, the Tahom, the deep, the void, the substrate onto which all the other letters are carved. It's about fate and unknowing, about the infinite, not just in terms of future, but also past. It's like divinity before they contracted themselves to the one point. It's the ability to embrace the wholeness of it all. And there's no number to it. It's like it's both zero and infinity. It's both where we came from and where we are heading eventually. And this is very far forward and sort of low on the reading, but again, there is no up, there is no down in the infinite. There is no beginning, there is no end. So if we spin this bowl, all these letters, as they are, change position, like the night sky. That Jupiter becomes up above. And Aleph goes back to the top. And the darkness of Chet stays in the center, because darkness is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere. I want to remember that we've got Beit underneath there, that we have our home right in the center. We have our bodies, we have the planet on which we dwell. And I love this reading for the new year, that we have Aleph at the bottom, Yud at the top, but again, no up and down. That the summer is coming to an end, but cycles and seasons change, and we'll come back to the top again soon. We have the Samach reminding us that things change the way they do. We're being watched over by the divine. In order to see better, maybe we need to close our eyes and become a little humble. That maybe right now is a time to pursue some justice, to give some tzedakah, to give to mutual aid, so that we can upright our gimel to move forward, that we can upright the doorway so that we can transition through, so that we can see the goodness in things that even appear dark, that we can see the goodness in the transitions between life and death and life again, and that we can remain present above all through all of it. The presence is right now, and usually, the most important thing that we have at our disposal, the most important tool that we have in order to embrace the wholeness of it all and to move into the space of the infinite. So I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to do this reading this morning, the last morning before the new year. And I'm grateful for all of you who've come along on this journey this past year, and I hope that you will join me again in the coming year. I wish you all a beautiful transition, whether you're going from summer to autumn, whether you're going from Friday to Saturday, whether you're going from 5783 to 5784, or whether you're just going from here to there, that you have a beautiful transition, that you step through that doorway. Lashana Tova, may you be written in the book. May you accept and understand the sovereignty is in the field. May you have a beautiful, beautiful day, moment, breath, and I will look forward to seeing you here in the future. Lashana Tova, Shabbat Shalom.